Shalom, everybody, and welcome to Beit Tefillah and part 3 of our series on keeping the feast days. Today I want to talk about two appointed times, First Fruits and Shavuot. Most of what was done during these two Moedim we cannot do today without a temple or a priesthood to attend to it. But we still need to remember these Moedim and recognize these days as we are part of the people of Yisrael. So this video is more or less a description of what was done so we can all better understand these two Moedim. To begin, let's hear from the Torah about first fruits. In Leviticus 23, 10-11, "Speak to the children of Israel, and you shall say to them, When you come in the land which I give you and shall reap its harvest, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest, and he shall wave the sheaf before Yehovah for your acceptance. On the morrow after the Sabbath the priest waves it." The Feast of First Fruits was held in celebration and to praise Elohim for the barley crop, and the very first ripe sheaf which was harvested was offered as an offering of the first fruits to Elohim. Now I want to pause here for a minute and talk about something that should be very evident from the scriptures, that the firstborn and the first fruits are all very important to Elohim. Let's hear some examples of this, starting with Genesis 4:4. "And Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat, and Yehovah looked to Abel and his offering," which means he accepted it. "And even the chosen people of Yehovah, the children of Yisrael, are called his firstborn," as we read in Exodus 4:22. "And you shall say to Pharaoh, Thus says Yehovah, Yisrael is my son, my firstborn." And in Exodus 13:2, "Set apart to me all of the firstborn, the one opening the womb among the children of Yisrael, among man and among beast, it is mine." And we also have Numbers 18:12-13. "All the best of the oil and all the best of the new wine and the grain, their first fruits, which they give to Yehovah, I have given them to you," speaking to the priest. "The first fruits of all that is in their land which they bring to Yehovah are yours," or the priesthood, because the people were to bring this in, and that was to provide for the priesthood. Okay, and there's many, many more examples in Tanakh about first fruits, firstborn, stuff like that. The plural Hebrew noun bikurim, meaning first fruits, derives from the root word bakor, meaning firstborn male. So that helps tie a lot of this together and make a little more sense. Special rights were conferred upon the firstborn sons of the children of Yisrael, namely a double portion of inheritance and giving them the responsibility of the spiritual leadership of the household. One way or the other, the firstborn and the first fruits of all things are to belong to Elohim. Same with the first of the barley harvest. The first ripe barley harvest was to be brought to the priest, and the priest waved it as a wave offering on the morning after the weekly Sabbath, which fell between the first and the seventh day of unleavened bread. Only after this event could the new grain be eaten. None of it was to be eaten until the first sheaf had been waved. Let's read that in Leviticus 23:14. "And you do not eat bread or roasted grain or fresh grain until the same day that you have brought an offering to your Elohim, a law forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings." Now the Hebrew word for offering in that verse is korban, which means exactly that, an offering. It's not the same as tithe, which is the Hebrew word ma'asar, which means a tenth. So to be clear, first fruits is an offering, it's not a tithe. Let's also read from Numbers chapter 18, verses 8, 12, and 13. "And Yehovah spoke to Aharon, and see, I myself have also given you the charge of my contributions, all the set-apart gifts of the children of Yisrael. I have given them to you for the anointing and to your sons as a law forever. All the best of the oil and all the best of the new wine and the grain, their first fruits which they give to Yehovah, I have given them to you. The first fruits of all that is in their land which they bring to Yehovah are yours. Everyone who is clean in your house eats it. The very best of the best, whether it was of oil, grapes, wine, barley, or wheat, were to go to Aaron and his sons, the priesthood, for their households." Take note that a lot of these goods, a lot of these things that were grown became available during different times of the year, so there was always sustenance. The children of Israel would have constantly been bringing the first of their crops to Jerusalem. In fact, this was done at least 3 times per year. The tithes and the offerings of first fruits were to be brought by the men and given to the priesthood during unleavened bread, Shavuot, and Sukkot. Since the destruction of the temple, we don't have much to do today on first fruits. As I've already talked about, it used to be that the men of Israel would gather in Jerusalem at this time to bring the first of their barley harvest before Elohim for the priests. And the priests would wave each man's sheaf of first fruit barley before Elohim for it to be accepted for each man who brought it in. A burnt offering of lamb and grain offering were prepared, but as I said earlier, these things are not done today without a temple or a priesthood. So to recap for the appointed time of first fruits. The Feast of First Fruits always begins at sunset on the Saturday, which occurs between the 15th and the 21st days of the first month of Abib during the festival of unleavened bread. It is not a Sabbath, and normal work may be done. It's also very important to know the exact day for first fruits because it's on this day that we begin the count to the completion of 7 complete weeks from first fruits to Shavuot. And now let's look into Shavuot. Let's hear what the Torah states, starting in Leviticus 23:15-16. And from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, you shall count for yourselves 7 completed Sabbaths. Until the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, you count 50 days. Then you shall bring a new grain offering to Yehovah. The Hebrew word for week is Shabuah, and it means literally 7, as in 7 days. Shavuot is the feminine plural, and it means weeks. So Shavuot is the Feast of Weeks. We arrive at the day of Shavuot from it being counted 50 days from first fruits, the day after the Sabbath that falls during the week of unleavened bread. First fruits and Shavuot, according to our current understanding, both fall on a Sunday, which is sunset on a Saturday or the first day of the week, when the first day of the week begins. This can also be called the 8th day. For both first fruits and for Shavuot, we must pay careful attention to counting the days. Just as with the Sabbath and with the number of days of unleavened bread, Shavuot presents us with another cycle of 7s. There are 7s everywhere. Cycles of 7s that are part of other cycles of 7s, always perfect and always continuing and regenerating. Every cycle of 7 is started with the first unit of the new cycle, which could be the number 8 in the old cycle. Let's also take a look at the number 8 in Scripture. In the Bible, the number 8 is significant of new beginnings, of renewal, of rebirth, of revitalization, and of entering into covenant. We have many 8s that represent these things, and I'll just talk about a few. A clean animal is acceptable to Elohim to be an offering or a sacrifice from the 8th day onward. Leviticus 22:27. When a bull or a sheep or a goat is born, it shall be 7 days with its mother, and from the 8th day and thereafter it is acceptable as an offering made by fire to Yehovah. The sign of the covenant was given to Abraham, circumcision, and is to be performed on a male child on the 8th day. Leviticus 12:3. And on the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin is circumcised. Aharon and his sons are consecrated within the tent of meeting for 7 days and were only fit to provide for the spiritual welfare of the camp on the 8th day. Leviticus 9:1. And on the 8th day it came to be that Moses called Aharon and his sons and the elders of Israel. The leper was to bring a sin offering and a burnt offering on the 8th day after his 7-day cleansing, as we hear in Leviticus 14:23. And he shall bring them to the priest on the 8th day for his cleansing to the door of the tent of meeting before Yehovah. Shmini Atzeret, or the 8th day of assembly, is the day after the 7 days of Sukkot. Leviticus 23:36. For 7 days you bring an offering made by fire to Yehovah. On the 8th day there shall be a set-apart gathering for you, and you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yehovah. It is a closing festival. You do no servile work. There are many other examples of 8s or 8ths in the Bible. They're always significant for growth, regeneration, completion, and renewal. Shavuot is special because it is another 8th day. 7 complete weeks of 7 days have passed since first fruits, and the 50th day is a day of renewal and regeneration, not only of days, but of weeks. Shavuot is symbolic and representative of the larger cycle of 7 sevens, namely 7 Shemitah years or land Sabbaths between Jubilee years, which takes place on the 50th year of each cycle. Those are the Jubilee years, every 50 years. Numbers 28:26. And on the day of the first fruits, when you bring a new grain offering to Yehovah at your festival of weeks, you have a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work. This can be a little confusing. Hearing the terms first fruits and festival of weeks being spoken of in this verse, it almost seems like they're the same thing or occurring at the same time. But we need to remember that the first month of the year is the time of the barley harvest, which crop is brought and waved by the priest on the day of first fruits. Shavuot, or the festival of weeks, is the time of year for the wheat harvest and also time for the children of Israel to gather together in Jerusalem. Deuteronomy 16:16. 3 times a year all your males appear before Yahweh your Elohim in the place which he chooses, at the festival of unleavened bread, at the festival of weeks, and at the festival of booths, and none should appear before Yahweh empty-handed. Now the reason we're not to come empty-handed is because they were to bring with them to Jerusalem their tithes, in addition to their offerings of first fruits of barley for unleavened bread, their wheat for Shavuot, and their wine and oil for Sukkot. Therefore, the first fruits mentioned in regards to Shavuot is the first harvested wheat. It's a set-apart gathering, and no work is to be done. Leviticus 23:21. And on this same day you shall proclaim a set-apart gathering for yourselves. You do no servile work on it, a law forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. Another thing you may hear of associated with Shavuot is something called counting the Omer. While we are instructed in Leviticus 23 to count 7 Sabbaths and 50 days, we are never instructed to count Omers. This was most likely done to keep track of the days leading up to Shavuot, so they would, stack the Omers up to keep track of the days, but it's just a tradition. We are instructed to count the days. After the tabernacle, when the temple was built, that was known as the house of Yahweh, or Elohim's dwelling place, because that is a place where he chose to put his name. Day after day, Sabbath after Sabbath, new moon after new moon, and year after year, offering and tithes of the people were to be given only at the temple, at the place where he chose to put his name. And we know that temple no longer exists today, as it was destroyed around 70 AD. And that's the reason we do not travel to Israel for any of the feast days, because there's no temple there any longer. Neither is there an intact and operating priesthood to be able to do exactly as commanded for the Moedim, such as first fruits and Shavuot. So let's recap for Shavuot. Shavuot is 50 days after the Feast of First Fruits, which begins at sunset on the weekly Sabbath, Saturday. Sunset on Saturday is the start of Sunday, which falls during the week-long Feast of Unleavened Bread. This day is for the gathering of Yisrael and is set apart to Elohim. It is a day of no work. In our understanding, Shavuot always falls on the Sunday after the 7th Sabbath after Passover, and always in the 3rd scriptural month. In Leviticus 23, we're instructed to count 7 complete Sabbaths, 50 days from first fruits, on which begin our count on day 1 on the day of first fruits. Remember that first fruits begins at sunset on the Sabbath, and 50 days later begins Shavuot at sunset on the Sabbath, as we go into the day that we know as Sunday. There should never be more than 50 days or fewer than 7 Sabbaths in your count. Okay? And that's about all there is for first fruits in Shavuot. Not much we can do today without a temple and a priesthood, but we do need to recognize them. We do need to rest on Shavuot as commanded and do the best we can to obey the word of Elohim wherever we have been scattered. Well, I hope this video blessed you, and for part 4 of our series on Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur, please see the link below in the description. Everybody be blessed and have a wonderful day.